Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking editor, Tom McKenna. Joining me today are Regulars Executive Art Director Mike Pekovich and Senior Editor Matt Kenny.
Slow down.
I'm just rolling here.
Hey, now you just talked all over my name.
That's Matt Kenny, and that's Mike Pekovich. Hi, guys.
Hey,
Hello.
Where'd you get the Ed Pernick cup?
From Ed Pernick.
Okay.
No, not really.
That's a nice cup.
It is, isn't it? I had to cover up some advertising. So
Maybe I should do the same.
I put tape on it.
All right, before we get started with all the fun, I need to take care of some business. First, please remember to spread the word about Shop Talk Live. Tell your friends via Twitter or Facebook and drop by our iTunes page and leave a comment. And prop us up with a generous star rating if you are happy with our product. Remember, you can also find us at iHeartRadio. Finally, please check our website for our exciting tool giveaway for our Fine Woodworking 40th anniversary. We're giving away 40 great tools, but you have to enter for each one. This week, you can win a DeWalt biscuit joiner. To enter, go to finewoodworking.com/40 sweeps. That's the number 40, and it's finewoodworking.com/40 sweeps. For this prize, you must enter by Monday, December 7th. Midnight or 11:59 p.m. So anyway, it's December already. And so, you know, all of us woodworking guys and gals in the office here are thinking about holiday gifts and what we want. And so we were talking about if we had a gift, you know, nothing spectacular, what would it be for, you know, something under $150 or so for the shop?
A DeWalt biscuit joiner?
You have to enter to win that.
Shoot. What you got, Mike? What would you want for?
I remember us talking about this yesterday, and I just remembered.
So you don't have any?
Well, the old chestnuts for under $50 would be a Starrett 12-inch combination square.
Yes.
Is that under 150?
Yes,
I think
it's
so.
less than 100.
Okay. If not, then the Starrett 6-inch, which I really like. Lee Nielsen Low Angle block plane.
But you already have these. What do you want?
What do you want? What don't you have?
Yes.
Just
A new toaster.
peace and love for the world. I don't want anything for myself. I'm good.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool.
I'll think of something by the time you guys are done talking.
How about you, Matt?
Uh,
A new mug?
I definitely don't want peace and love. No, I like this mug a lot. And there's no coffee in there, by the way. I don't drink coffee. What I want is a little Japanese block plane, little kana. I don't know what the actual Japanese name for it is, but they make little tiny block planes, maybe 6 inches long, but the iron is bedded at roughly the same angle as a smoothing plane, and it's beveled down. So it's not really a block plane. It's more like a tiny little bench plane.
It's a mini smoother.
Okay.
And exactly. It's a mini smoother. And that's what I would use it for. I would use it like a little mini smoother on my tiny boxes.
Is it a steel body or wood body?
It's a wood body. Yep. Yeah, white oak. And I saw a similar plane, very small plane like this at Tim Rousseau's shop. And I was just like, I want one of those. And I have I could probably make it, and I have a Western style blade that I could use in it, but I kind of just want to buy it and not have to make it.
Is this for your, I'm sorry. Is this for your box making?
Yes,
primarily?
that's what I would use it for. Yeah,
For mini furniture.
Is the bottom on that plane, is that dressed flat, or does that have the concaves that the larger Japanese planes have?
honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I don't.
You could make yourself like a little Krenov style plane. Get yourself a hawk iron.
Yeah, well, that's what I have, a hawk iron, and the problem with those is that I started to make one, and following the directions of is it David Fink? Is that his name?
Yeah,
David
who
Fink?
wrote the book on it.
Yeah. And it just started to, even making a block plane, the body was still kind of big because, you know, you got to laminate sides onto it and all this business.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot of plane for the width of the iron that you have.
Yes.
Yep.
So the Japanese planes are more petite and would do better on little tiny things.
More petite, like that.
So that's what I
Very cool.
that's what I would like.
Well, I have two options. One is the priority is probably getting. I need some carving tools. I've been doing a lot of inlay in the past year. Just kind of, I've always wanted to do it, and now I'm getting into it. And everything I've done so far has been somewhat circular, and I don't have any circular kind of carving tools. And so I wanted to get, if I can get a couple nice gouges, maybe a wide sweep and a shallow sweep, so I can start getting into those curves, I'd be pretty darn happy.
Yeah.
Oh, too bad it's not the 25th anniversary of Fine Woodworking, because you guys would be getting
We could get
presents
gifts.
from the company again.
No, did I tell you I got a hand plane for that 25th anniversary? It was
Yeah.
pretty nice.
Yeah, I think you might have talked about it on the podcast.
My other option, I'd love to get a gift, like a Visa gift card, so I can go to a big box store and get some plywood and 2x4s, because I really need to build some tool racks for my hand tools and saws and everything. Right now, I've got either it's in a drawer or under my bench or on top of my bench, and I'm kind of shuffling stuff all over the place constantly. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, good alternative for me would be I am making a box from ebony, which sort of I cut into my one big piece of ebony to do that. So I sort of need to replenish my ebony stock.
So $150.
Yeah,
Get yourself a
ebony.
chunk of
That'll
ebony.
give
Yeah,
you
give me like a
pen
6-inch
blank.
square, or some kingwood. I'd really like some more kingwood.
Kingwood.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I think I'd go wood. I think you're right. I think I'd do the same thing. $150. Because if you go to the lumber yard with the idea of spending $150, you'll probably spend $250, and if you spend $250, you can get some nice wood.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or a toaster.
Or some fancy bread for the toaster.
That's right.
All right. Well, that's all fun, and hopefully our spouses are listening, or family are listening, so we can get some good stuff under the tree or in our. Where do you gift? How many gifts do you give for Hanukkah again, Mike?
8 nights.
8 nights. All right.
8 nights.
Break it down.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move
Maybe
on.
the listeners can go to on the podcast entry for this week and put what they'd like for Christmas.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yes.
All right.
They're not going to get it from us.
We're not going to give it to them. Let's make that clear. It's all about us. All right, let's get on to some of our reader questions. The first one is from Fred Clark, and he's from Pottstown, Pennsylvania. Fred writes, "Hi, guys. I love the podcast. It's very entertaining with the snark, Matt. I got a whole bunch of Waterstones given to me, but I don't know their grit. Is there a way to tell what they are? Many of them feel the same." And we talked a little bit about this, and both Mike and Matt had some interesting tips on how to figure it out.
Yeah, I think your advice was a little more logical and to the point, so I'll go ahead and start. A lot of times, different
So to get the
brands,
bad advice first.
different brands of Waterstones, you can sometimes tell by the colors.
Yes.
A King brand Waterstone is a pretty common Japanese stone, and sort of the medium grits tend to be sort of a brick red color, usually like 800 to 1200. And then their finer stones typically are thinner. Sometimes they're mounted to a wooden block, and they tend to be more cream or buff colored.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, let's say if you got a couple brick colored ones, Matt is going to tell you how to differentiate between those two.
Yes. Just out of curiosity, wasn't King the first man-made Waterstone to come to the United States?
Is that right? I don't know.
I think that's right. But there are a lot of other makers as well. So
Yes, tons.
Yeah. I'm not as so. I don't know how well. I guess that would work if you could figure out what brand you have.
Right. And Norton stones, American stones are color coded as well.
Yeah, also color coded. Yeah, I mean, my Waterstones are color coded as well. Anyways, what I was thinking you could do is, first of all, you could start with just feel, and rougher stones feel rougher. And the other thing that you could do to test them, to sort of roughly sort them out into rough, medium, and fine, is get a pencil and start marking back and forth across it.
Mm-hmm.
rough stones will wear the pencil really fast.
Oh, that's a great idea. You didn't mention that yesterday, but that's
Yeah,
a
really.
fantastic idea.
Yeah, I was holding that in the pocket.
Shoot.
I knew you would have stole that.
I totally would have.
And so, judging by how quickly the pencil wears down, and on coarse stones, they wear down very quickly.
Yes.
You can sort of roughly sort them out into coarse, medium, and fine. And then within those groups, what you can do is take a chisel, for example, or a plane blade, and use the flat side and rub it on the stone. And you should be able to judge scratch pattern and also how reflective it is. And obviously, but the finer the scratch pattern and the more reflective or mirror-like the polish you get from the stone, the higher the grit. So then within your sets of coarse, medium, and fine, you can sort of then order them that way.
Yep.
But if you have a lot, all you really need is 3 stones.
Yeah, and if you have anything that is like really coarse, like the texture is like
don't use
heavy,
paper.
don't use it on anything.
Right. And so it doesn't really matter what grit they actually are. You just need one that is kind of coarse, and then one that's in the middle, and then one that will put a mirror polish on it. So I would do it by polishing the back of something.
Yeah. What about, this maybe is crazy, but what if you rub the stones together with the pencil mark? Would the pencil marks on the fine stone get erased by the coarser stone? Is that another way to possibly do it?
Well, they would both.
Crazy?
They would both certainly
abrade,
but someone taught me when I first learned Waterstones. Someone taught me that's the way you flatten Waterstones, and I don't really agree with that because 2 things. One, it's not guaranteed they're going to flatten each other. They might just take one might take the shape of the other. But 2, you have the cross contamination. You don't want to get rough or coarse grit embedded into your fine stone. So, I wouldn't do that. Yeah,
don't do that.
Yeah, and when I flatten my stones, I flatten them with a diamond plate.
Yeah,
and I always start with the finest stone and then work backwards.
Yeah, I did that exactly for the same reason. And actually, it was I think it was a Lee Nielsen show talking to Dana Bulchowski. He's their sharpening guy. And he actually goes the other way. He goes from coarse to fine. He said he doesn't worry about the coarse grits getting embedded in the finer because he says they're non-porous. That isn't an issue. What he doesn't like is that the finer grits create kind of a sludge or slurry. He doesn't like to clog up the coarser grits with the slurry from the finer grits. So, I don't know. Take your pick.
Yeah, I could see that, especially at a Lee Nielsen event where he probably doesn't have access to running water.
Right.
But I do mine at my sink, and I just wash off,
Yeah, I do too. Same thing.
If it gets clogged up.
Wash it. Wash and move on. Speaking of moving on, let's go to the next question.
All right.
This one is from Gary, who's building a bench and he needs some advice. I work in a garage that when I'm done needs to have all the tools moved out of the way. Putting a bench on wheels makes it much easier to move, but I'm concerned about the stability. Can I put wheels on without compromising function? And if so, is there a particular wheel you'd recommend?
Putting wheels on it definitely makes it easier for the bench to move.
Yes, and that creates problems.
And that's a good thing when you want to move it, but a bad thing when you want to use it.
Well, Raleigh did, back in 2012, Raleigh did a tools and materials write-up on a caster set from Rockler that allowed you to drop the wheels down and raise them when you needed to move the bench. So the bench was always on 4 feet when you were ready to use it. But when you needed to move it, you press down on a lever with your foot and you can move the bench wherever you want.
I think that's the operative thing. If you can get the wheels off the ground when they're not in use, whether they hinge up or they do some...
Well, what I've seen, which is pretty clever, probably in MOW or similar reader tip sections of other publications like McCall's and Redbook.
Parenting.
Is to set up your... I don't know why that came into my mind. set up your bench kind of like a wheelbarrow in a way, so that you have
Right.
two wheels at one end that only engage the ground when you lift up the other end.
Yeah.
And so you could set it up so that you could slide in like some 2x4s and lift up that other end and pivot it onto those wheels and then move it around
Right.
Yeah.
as needed.
Or, you know, I'm not really being sarcastic here. I'm not sure how much they cost, but we move all of our benches and heavy machinery around our big shop with a pallet jack.
Not too much at Harbor Freight.
I was going to say, go to Harbor Freight, get a pallet jack, you know, get your lower rails on your bench low enough where you can slide that thing underneath there, jack it up, move it around.
Yeah.
Maybe even put some of your other tools on a pallet, say your bandsaw, or maybe some other smaller tools you need to move around. Crank it around that way.
Yeah, but then,
Yeah.
then you have to store the pallet jack.
We'll just store it like underneath your workbench.
Yeah. Yeah. Tom.
Getting all snarky. Comes right back at me.
Actually, that would be a great solution as a pallet
Yeah.
jack. It would be much easier to move things around, and they turn tight radii.
Right.
And it allows you to pick up very heavy things easily.
And the kids would have fun with it,
Oh, yes.
I think.
Yes. Could you race it down a hill? That would be
That would be dangerous.
tremendously dangerous but fun.
Yeah,
We
jump
don't
on it
recommend
backwards
that.
with the handle going forward.
Right. See if you could steer it.
They have a brake, I think, so you can do a lot of things with it. We don't recommend any of these ideas, by the way.
Right. Well, riding it down a hill. The rest of the ideas we do recommend.
Yes,
We're actually recommending things on this
Yeah,
podcast.
riding it downhill would be considered a smooth move, which transitions us right into that segment.
What would
So
you do with a brain if you
let's
had
talk
one?
some smooth moves if we have them.
Yes, we do. Mike, you have one you want to start?
I do, yes. I was building a project in which I needed a hinge size which was a little smaller than the ones I normally use. I normally buy all my hinges from Horton Brasses in Connecticut. Awesome hinges, probably the best quality hinges I've ever used at a really good price.
Yes.
So that's why I use them all the time. But they make their cabinet hinges in just limited sizes. I needed something a little bit smaller, so I went to Whitechapel. I think they're out west somewhere, Arizona, I think. Again, another really good quality. I get a lot of funky hardware from Whitechapel. They do a lot of handmade period reproductions and stuff. Anyway, so but my thought was that the Whitechapel hinges were a little bit more expensive than Horton. But I went on their website and I looked and said, wow, these hinges are actually really competitive. They're actually pretty cheap. So I was kind of surprised at that. So I ordered my hinges. And the problem, anytime I have to order hinges, it's usually in the part of the project where I'm ready to like hang the door at that point. So that 3-day wait for shipping is always the worst part. Anyway, bit the bullet, ordered from Whitechapel, got my hinges. 3 days later, I was ready to go back to my shop and install them on this piece. And I looked, and I ordered like 2 different sizes because I didn't know what size I needed. So then I looked, and in the box was 1 hinge each of each size. I go, what is this? And of course, I knew right away what happened. I went back to the website, and it's like, prices per individual hinge. So. So now I have 2 hinges, 1 of each size. Only one is actually the size that I want. But what am I going to do with the second hinge that I only have 1 of that wasn't the size that I wanted? So I went ahead and got 2 more single hinges, 1 of each size, so that at least I would have, the pair that I used and the pair that I didn't use, at least I would have a pair and not a single hinge. But,
Right.
Nice.
another, $10 in shipping, another 3 days later, and I got my second
That's
hinge.
right.
Smooth move.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So actually, my smooth move is box related. Surprise, surprise.
Good golly.
And it's actually not the first time I've done this. So it's kind of I can't believe I've done it more than once. So here's I did it on this box, and this box I made last week, and so I had the sides ready to glue up.
So let's for the listening audience, Matt has a shallow box with how many lids essentially? What,
There
6, 7?
are 4 plus 3 is 7.
7. That's
So
good.
it's
Math was
9
not my strong point.
9.5 inches by 13 inches or so.
Yeah.
I think it's actually 8 by 12, a little over 8 by 12. And yeah, so there's 7 separate compartments with most of them have cherry lids that have green edges, and the one in the center is just all green. So
That's the envious one.
Yes, and little Kingwood little pulls.
Kingwood?
Yeah, Kingwood.
Wow, twice in one
It
podcast.
looks like there should be candy inside each of these little lids, and I'm really disappointed that there's not.
Well, fellow editor on staff, Dylan, suggested that I print out a very large picture of myself and glue it in place instead of the fabric. And then when you open up each one, you see just another part of my face.
Okay.
It'd be like an advent calendar.
Yes.
The opposite of an advent.
Right.
The Krampus calendar.
It would be the Krampus calendar. So anyways, I finished the inside of the sides, the inside face, got everything ready to glue up, laid out the 4 parts of the sides in order, taped at the corner, and spread my glue. And the way I normally do that is I spread glue on the 3 tape joints, and then the 4th joint's not taped yet because one's at one end, one part's at one end, the other part's at the other end.
Right.
And so then I'll spread glue on that final joint, close it up, and tape it. Well, I don't remember what I was doing at the time, but I was doing it in the dining room because it was warm, and as opposed to my shop. And I must have got distracted because I spread glue on the 3 joints, closed it up, taped it up, left it to dry. And I came home at night and start taking the glue off, and I get to that the tape off, and I get to that 4th joint and pull the tape off, and the joint comes apart. And I'm like, what the hell? I was like, what did I do wrong? And I realized, I didn't put any glue on the 4th joint. And like I said, that's not the first time I've done that. I've done that at least 1 or 2 other times as I've been making all these boxes.
So there's an air of omission there.
Distracted woodworking.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but fortunately, like this box, everything was long enough that I could easily get that joint open enough to put some glue in there and then tape it back up.
Yeah. Well, my smooth move involves, I know people are probably sick of my cutting board, my axe head cutting board, but I'm almost finished with it. I have to finish on it, but I bandsawed the outside, the concave and convex curves, and, the end grain shaping was really easy with my low angle smoothing plane. I don't know if I told you that I won that and for the 25th anniversary.
It was given to you.
It was given to me. I didn't win it. Anyway, the getting to the concave areas, I grabbed my spoke shave, and I didn't really, I was in a rush. I wanted to get it done. I just wanted to smooth out the bandsaw marks, and so I grabbed the spoke shave and just took a first pass, and it just jammed up and yanked out a bunch of wood, and I was like, oh, that really was a bummer to me because now I have more work to do. But that wasn't really the smooth move. The smooth move was thinking to myself, oh, well, maybe I was just going the wrong direction, or maybe if I skew it, I'll go into the other way and do the same thing. And same reaction. So I have 2 gouges on opposite sides. And, it all comes down to my thing is when I'm getting near the end of a project, I just want to finish it sometimes. And I should have taken time to sharpen the spoke shave and get it set up on a practice piece and go to work instead. I wound up grabbing my file and doing a bunch more handwork, and it was a nightmare.
Yeah. You already did your smooth move, right? Yeah. I should point out that people that want to see, like they're only listening and not watching, if they want to see the box, Tom, did you know that I have a website?
Yes.
And that I post pictures of all the boxes I make on my website?
And you have an Instagram account, too.
I also have an Instagram account.
Now, who has more likes on Instagram, Mike or Matt?
I don't know if you...
I don't think that's really important.
So
I don't think it's about number of followers per se.
Mike started Instagram like a month ago, and in his office, like when people do pledge drives and they keep track of how many donations, and they have like the thermometer.
Yeah.
Mike has one of those, but it's for people who are following him on Instagram.
I bought one of those electronic follower tickers.
That's right.
And it's on the wall in my room.
Yeah, every time he gets a like, it flashes across the screen.
Yes.
So-and-so liked your photo, Mike.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's move on to some questions. Are we done? We're done with smooth moves, I think.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no. I don't think
That's
we'll never
true.
be done with
Woodworking
smooth moves.
is chock full of smoothies. This question comes from Alec, and he says, I've been working on a few projects with some mostly quarter-sawn walnut. The boards are about 6 to 7 inches wide, but there's about 1.5 to 2 inches that is the piths. I've been removing the pith, figuring that it's less stable than the quarter-sawn section. Am I wasting usable portions of the board?
This question I'm a little confused by because, well, for two things. If it's actually the pith, like the pith, where it's right, you look at the end grain and it's a circle.
So with pith meaning like dead center of the
Dead
log.
center.
Right.
Cut that nonsense out.
Get rid of it.
Right? I think we all agree on that,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But honestly, if you go and buy your lumber at a lumber yard, I've never seen that in a board. I've seen it at Home Depot or excuse me, not Home Depot, at a box store. I don't want to single out any one in particular.
Sure. Just about every 2x4 I've ever used.
Yes, has pith in it.
Dead center.
A 2x4 is the pith. That's what they make them from. I've never seen it in from the F&S boards at a lumber yard.
No, and I typically never see walnut sawn for quarter sawn either.
Yeah, I was surprised by the walnut quarter sawn.
So it sounds like to me, I think you said this time yesterday, that he might have some locally sawn boards or something that he
Himself?
cut himself. In which case there could be pith in it, and you would cut that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is unstable. It's the mushy part of the wood, one of the mushy parts. Let's move on. This question is more of a comment, but less minor. He wants to give some additional info on the Makita grinder that we chatted about in our last podcast. And Len owns one of these. He says, "Hi, guys. I listened to Shop Talk 98, and I have a comment about the Makita grinder. I've had the Makita for more than 20 years. The major difference between the Makita and the Tormek is flat grind versus hollow grind. You use the Makita in a similar way to the Tormek, but with the Makita, you slide the tool being sharpened in a holding jig back and forth across the grinding wheel." And he says the Makita design is more for sharpening jointer and planer knives than anything else, and that makes total sense because we were talking about the idea of, well, how do you flatten that thing, and really who's using it for
Right.
planer,
Right.
hand plane.
And neither of
planes.
those things you should be doing.
Yes.
Right.
Right. That was our next point was, it's always best to send the planer or jointer knives out to be sharpened or use disposable ones because it's, you don't want to mess that up.
I went through a phase of trying to sharpen my joiner knives by hand. It never worked out well.
Was that
for
your
me.
trapezoid period?
Yeah. After I saw this email from Les, I realized, oh yeah, every picture I've ever seen of that grinder has a joiner or a planer blade on it when it's being used. And the other thing is, you should never do that because everything costs time, money, and frustration, right? And trying to sharpen your own planer and joiner knives as well as a professional service can do it is going to cost you a lot of time and a lot of frustration.
And a lot of trial and error.
Yes, whereas you could spend a little more money and just send them out to have it done.
Yeah, I mean, what most guys do, at least the folks I visited on the road, is they've got multiple sets of knives, and when one set goes dull, they send it out for sharpening, and they put a fresh set in, and that's kind of the way to do it, so you don't lose any work time.
Right. I've got I have more than one set for all my tools.
Yeah, I haven't yet gotten a spare set for my jointer yet, but maybe that's my holiday gift.
Yeah, I actually retrofitted my 8-inch joiner and 13-inch planer a while back with inserts that allow me to put disposable knives in there.
That's what I have on my my joiner, on my 12-inch Oliver joiner.
Is that the one you rebuilt, the big one?
That is the one I rebuilt. Yes.
Have you put that on your website yet?
No, that's not on my website, Tom.
All right.
I just send pictures of it to Mike about 3 times a week.
And Mike posts it on Instagram and gets more likes. All right, let's move on. It's time for our all-time favorite technique of the week. Who wants to get us rolling there, Mike? You want to roll one out?
What's the all-time favorite technique this week?
This week.
Of this
this
All-time favorite technique
of this
of
week.
the week.
Of the week.
Yes. This is really cool. It's something that I actually just found out about because a reader sent in a potential tip for methods of work, and it was so good.
So you're stealing some reader's tip.
I used to, yes. Luke Richard, who's a woodworking instructor at a high school in Colorado, sent in a tip where he said to get a little more grip on the bottom of his push sticks, he lays down some hot melt glue and then smooths it off really quick with a stick or a little scraper. And it gives it a really thin film, which isn't tacky to the touch, but it is really grippy. And I was cutting some really short pieces. Actually, I was working with ebony as well. I'm prepping for second week of a little T-box class where we do a little ebony clasp at the top of the box. And so I'm having to cut ebony strips basically into 3/4 inch lengths. And normally, in regular stock, I would make really long strips, cut them down, and when it's a little too short to hold on my offhand, I'll just throw it away and grab another strip. Ebony, I don't want to be wasting this stuff, so I needed a way to secure little nubbies so I could cut 3/4 inch off the end. So I took a piece of MDF and cut a little notch in it to use that as a hold down. But because a lot of times I was only pinching on maybe a 1/2 inch of stock or so, I remembered this hot melt glue tip. So got out my little hot melt glue gun and spread it on the bottom, and it worked awesome. It's just like really, really grips really well. So thank you, Luke. Me and Luke are buddies now. He doesn't know it yet, but
Mike's showing up for
gonna-
the holidays.
Yes.
Are you going to send him a toaster?
so I hope it makes it into the magazine because it works out really, really well. But
Mike
That's it.
Mike's not going to send him a toast. You might send some toast.
artisanally toasted bread.
Yes.
So thank you, Luke. It's a good tip. Hot
Yeah.
melt glue
Yeah, hot melt glue on your
on the bottom of the push stick.
On your stick.
Yeah.
yeah.
I've done sandpaper before, and you think that, and it does work pretty well. But the minute you get a little dust between on the surface, that sandpaper tends to skid around. It also can sort of score things up a little bit. So
When I'm cross cutting really short things, I think you were talking about cross cutting, right? I really wasn't.
I was
paying
cross
attention,
cutting
but-
a strip into 3/4 inch, and the opposite end I was using a little sliding hook stop to actually set the distance that I was cutting.
So when I do that, I'll have like a stop to control the length of my little pieces that I'm cutting. And then what I do is make kind of like a push stick you would use at the table saw for ripping, where it'll be long
Yes.
and then it'll have a little nubbin down at the end.
Yes.
And what I do is that little thing is not, the little nubbin's not as thick as.
Not quite as
Is that
thick.
is that the technical term?
is,
The nubbin?
I don't know. I have a feeling that term's probably wildly inappropriate.
Don't Google it.
That's exactly the technique I used.
And I use that to hold down everything. And that way I can just press down the offcut
Yeah.
and the piece that's not being, the longer piece all at the same time.
Yeah.
Anyways, my technique this week is something that I did not steal from a reader. It is, can you pass me all that business over there, Thomas? So here's part of it. And
Do you want the plane? Do you want the plane too?
yeah, the plane that I was not given as a gift by Taunton that I had to buy myself.
That's not engraved like mine is.
No, it's not. All right, so one of you. So I don't know if anybody knows this or not, but I make a lot of small things, and
Mini Matt.
so a lot of the boxes I've been making in this past year, I've gone from thinking a 1/4 inch was thin enough for the sides to now wanting to do like 3/16
Yeah.
inch sides.
I'm a big fan of 3/16.
Yeah, it's a nice size. And the problem with 3/16 is that it's really starting to get too thin for a planer, and a planer will chew that up. At least mine will.
I can get there. That's about as far as I can get.
Yeah, and it's for me, I can get there, but sometimes it'll come out a little uneven in thickness because it might be vibrating a little
You
bit.
definitely end up with a little more chatter, even if it's not snipe.
Right.
I think because the thickness of the stock is so thin, I do get a little more kind of little fluttery chatter
Right.
on
Do
the
you,
surface.
do you guys put an auxiliary bed
Yeah.
on the plane?
I've done that. It doesn't. I think the real problem with thin stock in a planer is not that, but it's how far apart are the rollers. Mm-hmm. The closer the rollers are to the cutter head, the better they're going to do holding the stock down as it goes through the cutter head. And so raising the board up doesn't change the relation of the rollers to the cutter head.
It helped me out a lot because I have rollers in my lower bed, and even if I lower those down, there's still a channel, and I've found that non-flat surface when I got really thin was a problem. So I have 1/2 inch MDF with the cleat front and back.
Okay, I can see how that
I just
works.
leave it in there 100% of the time now.
Yeah, my bed doesn't have rollers, so it only at the top. But anyways, and I personally don't own a drum sander. We have one here at work, but it's not always convenient to use it. And so I had some material. I'm making 2 boxes this week, one ebony, one cherry, and I wanted the size to be 3/16. And I remembered I recently read a little short thing by John Reed Fox in the magazine about making kumiko.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, there was a photograph of how he thicknessed the kumiko parts. And I believe that what he has is a little Japanese hand plane that actually has strips attached to the bottom of the sole.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then he can pull that along. And so it becomes, those strips are like a depth gauge.
Yes.
And so he can plane parts to a very precise thickness. And I thought that was really cool. But I didn't, I was like, well, what's a different way that I could do that so I don't have to attach strips every time I want to do that? And so I came up with a little planing stop, I guess. And it's, the base is a piece of plywood, and there's a cleat that goes into my vise to hold it. And before I attached that cleat, what I did was I glued down, maybe if you look at it this way, I glued down 2 pieces of cherry. And those are spaced just a little bit wider than the blade on my number 4 smoother. All right? And then what I did was send that through my planer. And I planed those strips down until they were just a hair taller than 3/16.
Mm-hmm.
Because when the plane's on there, the blade will project a little bit beneath the sole. So I wanted those a little bit more than 3/16. So I planed those down, and then I attached a stop to plane against. And then to keep the plane on track and to keep it from cutting into the little thickness strips there, I put 2 guide rails on it to keep the plane moving in the same direction, in a straight line. And so then my stock just fits down in there. And what I do is I will, I hand plane one side of it to pretty much what it would, that's ready for a finish there.
Right.
Then I go and resaw it just a little bit over the desired thickness. And then I just pop it in there and boom, 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 couple
really
of
cool.
passes.
Very cool.
And it gives me nice, consistent stock. And I know some people might think, well, why go through all this trouble? Why not just have the stop here and just do it freehand? Well, the smaller something is when you like a box, the less variation you can have in your material
Yes.
to get accurate joinery.
Right.
So there can't really be any variation in that at all if I want to have an accurate miter at the corner or an accurate bird's beak or bird's mouth joint or what have you. It's got to be perfect.
And plus, you're holding it tight in place. There's no wiggle room on that.
Yes,
piece. It's not
yeah,
gonna
there's
skitter
that.
out on you. So
Right.
That's cool. Another.
Yeah. I mean, the only limitation of this jig, and it's not really a limitation, is that the width of the material can only be so wide because you can't have these tracks further apart than the plane body.
Right.
So it's limited to, for this, it's about 2 inches. If you wanted to go wider, I guess you could get like a number 4.5.
Right.
And that would go up to what, 2 3/8, or is that 2.5?
It's 2.5.
2.5. So you could go a little bit wider with something like that. And I actually made a smaller version for thinner stock, 1/8-inch stock, that I used my adjustable mouth block plane with.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it's
Neato.
cool. It worked great. Worked wonderfully.
Awesome. Well, I have my all-time favorite tip of the week. I'm going back to blue tape, which is kind of Mike's signature.
I pretty
item.
much invented that, so thank you.
It's the Pekovich brand.
Yeah.
Now, as I mentioned before, I've been doing a lot of inlay or experimenting with it a lot. And the first time I did it, I struggled with squeeze out and, cleaning it up afterward. And so what I did this time, I inlaid a heart into this cutting board. And before I put the inlay in place, I covered the excavation with the blue tape and then trimmed around it carefully with an X-Acto knife. And once I put the inlay in, any glue squeeze out that did pop out went right onto the tape, and I zipped off the tape, and the whole surface around the inlay was free and clear of glue. It was
Cool.
a wonderful experience.
Very nice. I did something similar recently on a box I was making. On the box lid, I was going to excavate a little circle mortise into it and paint that a different color than the lid. And I'd already painted the lid, so I was like, all right, well, let me cover the top of the lid with blue tape.
Mm-hmm.
That would allow me, one, to lay out the center of the hole. And then, two, I realized I could drill through the tape, and then I would have a perfectly masked off top that would allow me to paint that little circular mortise without having to worry about getting paint on the already painted top, because it was two different colors. So it was sort of
Very
similar.
cool.
Yeah.
And here's one more blue tip.
All
Blue
right,
tape
let's
tip.
rock it out.
I think this was from Terry Masachi, where when you're doing built-ins, a lot of time you're installing trim, and to cover that little finished nail head, you'll use those little wax sticks. And if you try to do that over the wood, you try to color in that hole, the wax kind of smears all over the place. I think I learned it from her, where she puts down a piece of blue tape before she fires in the trim nail. And then with the tape still on, she'll apply that little wax color stick to fill the hole. Then you peel the tape off, and it's just like right there. You don't make that big old smudgy mess that you then have to wipe off.
Nice.
There you go.
Very
Pretty
nice.
cool. All
We should
right,
do a whole podcast dedicated to blue tape.
blue tape.
Yeah, special issue.
Would be
Blue tape, and then tips and tricks that Mike has stolen from readers.
That's like a 2-part podcast.
That's right.
I'm kidding. All right, let's move on back to our questions. This one is from Kendall, and he writes, I own a Laguna 1412 bandsaw, and I'm trying to resaw using a half-inch positive claw blade, but I'm getting a lot of deflection. I'm fairly sure the issue is the blade and not the setup. Since I don't want to purchase a tensioner, I've clamped my dial caliper to the blade to check tension, and from what I can tell, I have about 15,000 PSI. What do you think of that, Matt?
It's got to be at least 60,000 PSI.
So Kendall's looking for some advice, and he's also asking for some advice on a good resaw blade. And, it's funny, we just did an article by Tim Rousseau on resawing.
It's
and,
coming out.
It will be coming out soon.
Yeah.
So Matt does a lot of resawing, so you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I think by positive claw, I'm not really sure what that is, but I think he just means that maybe it.
I mean, I thought
It's a
I assumed
hook?
it was a positive hook, but
Well, there are no
No.
negative hook bandsaw blades that I know of. It's got to be. He must mean like a hook tooth, as opposed to like a skip tooth, or I'm not sure what he means. But I would buy at least like say a half inch. You could, Tim recommends just a half inch wide, high carbon steel blade with maybe 3 teeth per inch.
Sure.
That will work fine for resawing. I prefer, it's okay for me to say brands, right? I think.
rock on.
I prefer, for most resawing, I prefer either a wood slicer from Highland Hardwood, or there's a similar now blade from Infinity, and I've used both of them. And they both give very good surfaces, and they're not too expensive, and I just use them for resawing. And so that's what I would use, either what Tim recommends or one of those wood slicers. And for a 14-inch bandsaw, this one has a 12-inch resaw capacity,
Yeah.
but still a half-inch blade is plenty.
Yeah, if you're getting
Yeah.
flex, there are other problems that just going to a wider blade is not really
Yeah.
going to solve for you.
Yeah, you don't need a really wide blade to resaw.
No, I
And-
mean, I use I have that same brand saw, and I have a half-inch resaw blade on it, and I just did some resawing, and it worked out fine. It's he may have a dull blade, or his setup may actually
Deflection
be,
is most likely, if the blade is deflecting, that's a dull blade.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
he's getting a wobble, like
it
a
could be.
warp-
I mean, if it's a really high resaw, or your guides are up too high, and your thrust bearings or blocks are not right up against the back of the blade, that movement could cause some flex. But really, it probably means you're applying too much pressure because the blade's dull.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just, if it's not a brand new blade right out of the box, I'd say put a new blade on there and see if that helps.
Yeah, I mean, because the guides on that saw, they're ceramic and they're super easy to set up. And
Okay.
you know, I've never had a problem with it. Not that I've done a whole lot of resawing. I just got the saw last year, but
Yeah, I mean the other type of phenomenon you could call a deflection, conceivably, is that what's happening is the blade is either drifting in a sense towards the fence or away from the fence, so that as you cut, if it's drifting in towards the fence, as you cut, it wants to pull the stock off of the fence.
So the blade is not parallel with the fence.
Exactly.
Yep.
So if that's the kind of drifting that you're experiencing, that means that your fence and your blade are not parallel to one another, and you need to correct that. And there's more ways. You know, you can try to center the blade perfectly on the wheel, or you can just get it as best as you can and then adjust the fence parallel to the blade. And on that bandsaw, you should be able to do that without any trouble.
yeah.
So, and you know, the half-inch high carbon steel blades that, you know, 3 TPI, and I guess you'd want a hook set, you know, hook tooth rather, they're not that expensive.
Yeah.
So buy, like, you know, maybe for your birthday or for Christmas, you know, $150, get yourself 10 of them or something, and always have them on hand, and, you know, keep a fresh blade. It's
That's what I want.
10
bandsaw
blades.
blade.
Bandsaw blades, because I went through. I'm on my last of like 3 bandsaw blades that I bought as a set, and it's been on there for a little too long.
Yeah. I mean, a bandsaw is just like any other hand tool.
Goes
you know?
dull.
Yeah, and they work best when you have a sharp blade.
Yep.
Yeah, and if you're doing a lot of resawing, you're going to wear out the blade pretty quickly because they're all in contact for a pretty good distance through the wood.
Yeah, Raleigh has told me a story on several occasions.
Keep it clean.
The same story. No, it is about some friend he has. You know, he has all these buddies out there in the local woodworking guild, and one of the guys is like, you know, can you come over and help me set up my my bandsaw? I'm having trouble with it. It won't cut straight. Da 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 da. And you know, all these guys know that Raleigh's the fine woodworking gearhead, so they call him up to set up their machines. And Raleigh gets over there. And he looks at the machine. He's like, you know, I've had this machine. It's expensive. Why won't it cut straight? And he's like, well, how long have you had this blade on it? And he goes, well, I've had the bandsaw for like 5 years. So I guess 5 years. It's just like, well, there you go. You know, change your blade.
Problem solved.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's start wrapping up our episode, and I'll dive into some of our iTunes comments. This one is from West Dew. He says, the show is best when it has interviews with professional woodworkers. It is useful when giving reviews of tools or techniques, though negative reviews are few and far between. And he says, the casual bantering is a waste of his time. So take that, Matt.
If you could have like read that at the beginning of the show, that would have helped us out a little bit.
Exactly. You know, it is one plan. We would like to get some more live interviews, perhaps, down the road. I think it is fun to get another person in here, and you know, especially when the question is directly related or, you know, referring to a specific article. Be good to get the author on. Anyway, let's move
I
on.
would like to point. He believes it's a waste of his time.
Exactly. That's what I said.
Yeah, his
Wasted
time.
His time.
Yeah.
Right.
My time is what I'm concerned.
You've got all the time in the world.
Right.
Now this one, let's move on to, I don't know how to pronounce. What do these guys come up with these tag names? WizTat. He just says, I just found this, have listened to 10 podcasts so far, all gems of fun and knowledge. Thanks, guys. Keep them rolling.
Take that, West Dew.
There you go. And this one is coming from Wit2380. That's a catchy one. He just binge listened to the entire archive. I love the show. It's very informative, and I love this segment. It's very funny.
He also asked if we know the name of a good divorce lawyer. Because he just listened to all the podcasts.
All right, let's move on to Domari 2015. And he says, it's funny, informative, and inspirational. Because these guys are writers as well as accomplished woodworkers, they are able to articulate their thoughts very well. I just got done listening to podcast episode number 82, and I especially appreciate Mike's pearls of wisdom about making the most of limited time in the shop. I think we all do. And finally, this one is from longtime iOS Mac user. And he says, hello, Tom and Mike and Matt et al. As a sometime woodworker and a subscriber who's recently discovered Shop Talk Live, I have to say it's great to hear your banter and profit from the wisdom you dispense. I finally heard or seen the whole collection, and I'll say Ed and Asa will be missed. I hope again we'll hear of recent blunders, and we just did some blunders today. So
Yes.
you know, we're right in step with that iOS user. So and that's all we have for this week. Thanks, guys, for sitting down again. Tune in again in 2 weeks on December 18th for our next episode. In the meantime, let us know what you think by leaving a comment on iTunes, and don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating. What do you have to say here, Matt?
The next episode is episode
100. Meanwhile, if you have any woodworking questions, send them as well as your comments to shoptalk@taunton.com. That's shoptalk@taunton.com. You can catch the podcast via iTunes, stream it on your computer at www.shoptalklive.com, or catch us on iHeartRadio. Thanks for listening. Have fun in the shop. And the kids would have fun with it, I think.
Yes. Could you race it down a hill? That would be
Dangerous.
tremendously dangerous but fun.
We
Jump
don't
on it
recommend
backwards
that.
with the handle going forward.
Right. See if you could steer it.
They have a brake, I think, so you can do a lot of things with it.